Hey guys, so today I wanted to do something a little different. I've got a lot of like why the pros play and stuff, and my other series are going to continue going, but there's just been fewer balance patches, and so the meta is shifting a lot slower. So, but instead of us getting a lot of repeats on why the pros play and they're all playing about the same heroes all the time, I decided that I wanted to kind of hit some topics that I've talked about with some people in my Discord, I've talked about with some friends, but maybe are topics that are, I don't know, a little bit more wide. I think you guys might be interested in them. So this is kind of a video that we're going to be talking about reworks and my thoughts on when a rework should happen, when a rework shouldn't happen, and what a rework should be doing, as well as some of the reasons, or at least the heroes that I think should get a rework and why. So let's start off and explain why reworks are necessary. Reworks are usually something that requires less effort than making a new hero that can feel like a new hero. And I was watching a stream. It was a Riot employee. If you guys are unfamiliar with Riot, they make a game called League of Legends, which is probably the most popular game in this genre of MOBA. So I think League of Legends is, because it's been the most popular for so long, and it's kept the highest player base for so long. I think they're a good example to look at for things like this when they have specific criteria or design philosophies that they use. So I was watching this developer's stream, and he was talking about reworks because he had just reworked. I think it was Wukong at the time. So this was a little while back, and he said we have three criteria when we're looking for a rework. And the first criteria, he said, was outdated visuals. Some examples that he had mentioned and I had found were like Mordekaiser, Poppy, and Tarek. If I was to pull up, let me see if I can do, let's go old Mordekaiser versus new. You'll be able to see that the visuals are very, very different. It was very clunky, and then it switched to being very like clean. And that's true with a lot of theirs. A lot of their reworks are based on design. But sometimes they don't just do it based on design, and that's where the other criteria gets in there. So Mordekaiser, Poppy, Tarek were those. Their next criteria is hard to balance heroes or champions, as they call it in League of Legends. So some of these were like Evelynn. Now, Evelynn is something I guess you could say is very similar to Valeera. Evelynn has pretty similar abilities. Evelynn stealths in between combat, where Valeera also stealths in between combat. Both Evelynn and Valeera's stealth can last forever, and Evelynn used to have the what is it? Cheap shot, basically, as her W. While she was in stealth, she could stun a target for 2 seconds, which is a long stun. I don't even think cheap shot in this stuns for 2 seconds. I think it's like maybe 1.5. So Evelynn had a 2 second stun. They then turned it into a slow, and it was still too strong. In League of Legends, stealth is very powerful because the lane phase lasts so long and team fights are so few and far between that by the time that there's team fights, you already have 10 kills. And you can't really ward too well against a stealth hero because they can see the wards that can see them. So generally, an invisible ward can only see visible heroes, and a visible ward can see any heroes. And so Evelynn became this dominant force that became almost impossible to balance. If her abilities had any CC at all connected to them, they were too strong. If they had no CC connected to them, there were better stealth heroes. And so Evelynn was in a really tough spot where if they made her a little too strong, she was played all the time, and if they even nerfed her a little bit, then she was completely outclassed. So it required her to be completely reworked in order to like compensate for that. And I think Valeera is kind of in a similar boat to that. But I don't think Valeera is as bad as Evelynn was. I think Valeera has a lot of potential in a lot of different scenarios, but she is a little bit more niche. She's not necessarily outclassed by anyone. It's just that her niche doesn't come up as often as maybe it should. So what I would ask for Valeera is like maybe she gets a build that is a little bit more wide use, and then she still has her niche use. But I don't think that she needs a rework. I was just using her as an example that was similar to Evelyn. Graves is another hero that was reworked because he was too difficult to balance. Graves had really interesting interactions with items, and what they said is that they had a hard time creating new items in the game because this one hero was causing so many issues with new item abilities. And so Graves was a good example of that. Rengar, another one that was reworked because of balance. Rise is most similar to, I would say, Mephisto, in that every ability that Rise casted, he could be a mix between like Mephisto and Orphea. Whenever he lands abilities on heroes, he can lower the cooldown of his abilities. That's basically his trait. I guess he's more like a mage version of Illidan, which is a good example because Illidan's one of them that I think should be reworked for this reason. But yeah, I would say that he's closer to a ranged Illidan. So Illidan has a trait that says basic attacks heal you for a little bit and reduce your ability cooldowns by 1 second. Well, the lower cooldown your abilities are, you can stay on the target because if they try to run away, you have your dash to get to them, you have your jump to get to them, and then you can lower the cooldown of that. Well, that was kind of the issue that Rise had. Rise had a root. And so he would throw a bunch of it. He would root you in place. He would throw a bunch of abilities, and he would start walking closer to you. And when you started walking away, his root was back off cooldown. He'd root you again, and it seemed kind of overpowered. So then they lowered all of his damage numbers down to the point that he almost did nothing, and nobody played him anymore. You buff him a little bit, and then he's overpowered again. And so Rise was kind of the best example of that. He's actually been reworked about 5 to 6 different times. For them trying to keep that feeling of Rise without making him overpowered. Urgot was another one that was kind of a strange one. Urgot was actually reworked, and a lot of these are reworked for kind of multiple reasons, but Urgot was reworked because of basically all 3 of the reasons. And I'm going to talk about the last reason here as well, which is low popularity. Low popularity is a great way to rework a hero and basically bring out a new hero. If you only have less than 1% of the population even playing that hero at all, then reworking that hero upsets a very small amount of people, and there's a chance that you bring out a new, exciting playstyle that's completely different from what it was before, and it's now fun. A great example of that is Galio. Galio in League of Legends was very low popularity, and he could only really do 1 or 2 things. He was seen in such a small amount of games that the stats websites literally said, hey, we don't even have enough information to tell you a build for him. And this is true with the other 3 heroes in this list as well. Volibear, Swain, and Trundle. They all were played so little that the stats websites couldn't even tell you a build. After their reworks, they became rather high popularity, with the exception of Trundle. Galio, Volibear, and Swain have a new crowd that calls them those heroes their mains. They've seen competitive play. Galio has gone up and down in competitive play. Volibear, same thing. Swain, same thing. They're all heroes that see a ton of play now. And so it keeps a really wide roster when you have a lot of heroes that all have potential play. And so those are the 3 major reasons: outdated visuals, hard to balance, and low popularity. I'm going to add in another one that's kind of a small one, but it's the outclassability. And what that means is if there's 2 heroes that do very similar things, let's say there's 2 heroes that both have blinds, both have stuns, and both have unstoppable. If one's stronger than the other, then that one's always going to be played more than the other. So you need to make sure that there's always enough different between them, and that's where a rework could be useful. So those are all the things that why there's reworks. So let me talk a little bit about the level of rework before we get into everything else of what I think should be reworked and everything like that. So I think that there are 3 levels of reworks. if we were to go and look at these levels, we recently saw a change to Blaze, right? Blaze's level 7 talents got moved to 13 and got buffed. His level 13 talents got moved to level 7. That, to me, is called a mini rework. A mini rework changes a hero enough to where it could change them in the meta and where they sit, but it doesn't really change how they're played that much. Just mainly when they're played and where they stand in the meta, potentially where they sit in the meta. A full rework would be something like Vala or let's say Falstad. So let's look at Falstad, for example. Falstad, they gave him 3 quests for level 1, so you have 3 unique playstyles. Vala, same thing. Where her playstyles are still about the same, they gave her 3 dedicated playstyles. Those are good reworks, where you change talents throughout the board, and you might keep the identity of the hero the same, but you might change how they accomplish that identity. And then the tier 3 of a rework, if the Blaze is tier 1, Vala Falstad was tier 2, the tier 3 would be Tassadar, which is called a redesign. A redesign is where you change enough about a hero that they fit a completely different role. Or they just completely play differently from what they used to play. So good examples of redesigns are like Tassadar or like Sylvanas, where Sylvanas was kind of a turn off structures and just do AoE damage to everyone bot, to being this like dive assassin who could only temporarily turn off structures. Tassadar went from being a support hero to being a mage. And so these are great examples of redesigns. Now that we know tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 of reworks, what am I concerned about for reworks, and what do I feel maybe Blizzard might not be doing right, or maybe they're doing really well, maybe League isn't doing it right, and let me talk about it. So the first thing I want to talk about is kind of my issue with the recent reworks, and it's not that the reworks were necessarily bad. It's more of who they decided to rework. I felt like didn't meet any major criteria other than we have skins for these heroes coming out, so we're going to rework them. And that's an okay criteria if you're trying to sell skins. A hero gets reworked, should bring more excitement to that hero. You bring out a skin for that hero, and now that there's more excitement to that hero, people are all hyped up, they buy the skin. That's great, and I don't mind them doing that. Blizzard, if we want to keep this game has to make money. And I mean, most people have enough shards to buy whatever skins they want, but let's say that they didn't. I think that's perfectly fine. Reworked heroes should have skins come out when they're reworked. In fact, League of Legends does this almost every time, but they do it a little bit backwards. Well, they do it more forward. Hold on, let me explain it this way. League of Legends tends to decide who they're going to rework, and then they send it over to the design team, and they say, hey, can you redesign all the skins that this champion has, and also add in 1 new skin? And so a great example of that would be Dr. Mundo. Dr. Mundo recently got a rework. He had an old design. He got a rework. And when he got this rework, they made brand new skins for every skin that he used to have, and they brought out a new skin so that people could purchase a new one. And so what they do is they basically put everyone to work on a new hero whenever they do a rework. And it makes people feel a little bit less hurt by the reworks in League when the emphasis is basically a brand new hero. But it's a lot easier to make or to rework, and that's why I'm still on this side of things. But the reason why I'm kind of upset at the heroes that they choose to do for the reworks is that they're picking popular heroes that are easy to balance and don't necessarily need a redesign. And what I mean by that is there were 3 reworks that kind of bothered me. The first one is Whitemane. This is a little bit of an older rework, but this was right about after she launched. She was hard to balance. But they did end up balancing her pretty well. So she had a Q build that was kind of busted. I made a video about it. It was busted. Got nerfed. Then she had her W build, and it was strong, but it had kind of a little bit of a mini game. They nerfed it a little bit, and then it was balanced. I think she was sitting at like a 48% win rate in Storm League. She was played in very few games in competitive. But she had a 42% popularity that she was still being played after her rework, or sorry, after her release. They reworked her because they didn't like the little minigame. I actually loved the minigame. I thought it was really fun. It gave you some mana management, and there were other adjustments you could make to the little minigame. And if you don't know what the minigame was, basically when Whitemane launched, every Q that you did would cost more mana until you let it time out. But if you casted a few Qs and then you casted your W or your 1, the Clemency, it would reset all of your stacks so that your Q would go back to a normal amount of mana, and you would gain mana back based on how many stacks you had. And so you would burn like half your mana, and then you'd press W and gain your whole mana bar back. And so that ended up being this kind of fun play style. I thought it was fun, but I understand if others didn't. Where you would need to plan out when a fight was going to happen and plan out where you wanted to put your Qs before your W. And you'd also need to decide, hey, do I need to use a W on an enemy for more healing, or a Clemency on an ally for safer healing and just to get the mana back? And there were a couple tricks that I did as well where I would instantly break my thing just so I could get mana. So if I wasn't expecting a fight to happen soon, I might heal everyone up to full, do Clemency, and just break it immediately so I get all my mana back and I don't have to stand still and channel for a long time. It added a lot of like skill variety, or skill expression and ability variety on how you utilize your abilities. So I really enjoyed it. That being said, she was reworked. Her popularity from that patch to the next patch, sorry, if we're skipping 1 week, because reworks, everyone likes to try out reworks. So from her patch before the rework to 2 weeks after her rework, her popularity dropped from 42% down to 4.6%. She nearly dropped by 90% popularity because of a rework. And that's really bad, in my opinion, because it's the opposite of what League was trying to do. League would take a hero that nobody plays anymore and basically create a new hero so that it's like they get an extra release of a new hero. Where what Blizzard did was effectively killed a hero. They removed 90% of the players of a specific hero. And so that was something that was pretty bad. Another example of this is the recent one, the Joana rework. Her popularity was at about 40% as well. I think it was 39%. And it dropped down to 32% after her rework. And again, waiting the amount of time for a little bit of balance for people to get used to the playstyle, everything like that, 32%. That one's not as bad, but this was also a hero that wasn't difficult to balance before. And now they're having trouble balancing her ultimates. Balancing her like spinning hammers, and balancing some of her other abilities. And it may take them some time. I think that she'll eventually get balanced, but again, wasn't really one that needed a rework. Raynor, another example, 29% popularity down to 15%. That's probably more of a balance issue, but just another hero that didn't necessarily need a rework. In fact, one of the guys I coach, he plays so much Raynor, he was like, I don't even really want to play Raynor anymore. So now that you kind of understand why I don't like reworks, is because they can basically kill a playstyle of a hero, and we're still sitting on Tassadar, which is kind of a great example of that. Old Tassadar played completely differently, but he had kind of the problem that old Graves had, where the whole game had to be balanced around what Graves could do with specific items. Tassadar was a great example of that. The whole game had to be balanced around what Tassadar brought to a team comp. Old Tassadar's shields gave a lot of lifesteals, so heroes like Vala, heroes like Tracer could be practically unkillable because they would get a shield to prevent burst, and they would get extra healing to allow for sustained healing. So you basically had a secondary healer dedicated on keeping your carry alive, but that person also had wave clear, and that person also had walls, or Archon, whatever you really needed. It was basically a Swiss Army knife that brought everything that you needed. So that is an okay rework for those reasons. But it did delete an old playstyle, a playstyle that was rather popular. So my goal with a rework is to hit heroes that are not played that much, and if they are played that much, fix only what's broken with them. For example, they have a talent that everyone takes, like Stitches always takes the longer hook. Make it baseline, and then give them something more competitive, and then nerf a couple other things to compensate for that. I like that design. I think that's great. Now, if a hero's not popular, try to find out why they're not popular and see if there's ways to work around that. Can you keep the design of that hero okay without like adding some playstyle to it without destroying that hero? Gazlowe is a great example of this. Gazlowe was low popularity. Gazlowe grew in popularity after his rework, got a little bit of adjustments and balance. Gazlowe is better for team fights now than he was before. And he still does a lot of the old things that he used to do. So that's a good example of that as well. So let's talk about the heroes that I think need reworks. And keep in mind, this is my personal belief. And if you're someone who loves these heroes, don't take offense because the heroes that I've recommended not to rework get reworked, and the heroes that I've thought needed reworks don't get reworks. I've even sent rework ideas to Blizzard and nothing. So keep in mind, nothing I say is going to change anything in this game. But these are just my personal ideas as someone who plays a lot of this game, watches a lot of the game, and has been kind of following the stats of this game for quite a while. So let's start off with the old models, the ones that I feel like just are clunky when they're in the game and they feel out of place. And that is Arthas. I don't know why, but Arthas feels very small for what he is, and he just reminds me a lot of like the Mordekaiser rework. Mordekaiser was supposed to be this huge, like, giant metal demon thing, and he was just this kind of like awkward, clunky thing with like lower frame rate than everyone else somehow. And I feel like Arthas kind of has that feeling too. He just seems so small for what he's supposed to be. I mean, he's the Lich King, and like his size in game just seems small, and I feel like they were almost trying to put too much detail into stuff that things just don't load very well when in game. So I would say Arthas needs just a remodel, basically. I think as far as his playstyle, Arthas is currently fit in like a niche situation. The enemy's running a lot of melee assassins, so he can slow all of them at the same time. In the current meta, we don't see a lot of melee assassins, so his popularity and playstyle has dropped. But I don't know if that necessarily means he needs a rework. More so that as the meta shifts, he might pop back in like a lot of tanks do as metas shift. I do think that many people are playing him as a bruiser, and I think that they could potentially give him, they could throw him a rope or something by giving him a competitive talent that potentially increases his wave clear or camp clear ability so that he would be a little bit more viable as a solo laner, because that's the one thing that he lacks. But he is actually a really fun solo laner. So I do think potentially at level 7, competing with some very powerful talents, they could probably give him something that says like, you gain mana while using E on a minion wave, and your E does triple damage to minions or something like that. And that could be a great way for giving him a new playstyle without actually ruining what he currently does or making what he currently does overpowered in team fights. And it would compete with one of his best tanking talents, so I don't think too many tanks would take it. Which is why I think that a simple adding a talent and then giving him a visual update would be all that Arthas would require. I would say Morales is the next one that I don't know why. I just personally feel that when Morales is in game, she just looks out of place. I don't know the best way that they can answer this other than going more in the route of like her skins, which don't feel as out of place. They feel, I mean, this one feels really out of place, of course. But I think that a lot of her skins feel a little bit better than her base model. Even this almost feels better than her base model as far as feeling in place in the game. And so I would say maybe approach it more in that direction of just a remodel. But Morales has kind of a similar problem. She is a niche pick, and I don't think that she would be hurt too much by a rework. Keep in mind that Morales was kind of the go-to healer. she was the healer that was, hey, you need an easy healer, play Morales, she's pretty easy. Except that she was more expensive, so people usually just said play Lily. If Morales, I think Morales needs a rework and needs her gold cost dropped down. And I think that her rework should just be a little bit less punishing on the energy aspect. Um, and have more creative ways to get energy back. I don't know what that would be yet. But keep her a playstyle to where she's still an easy healer for people, while also giving her a playstyle to add a little bit more skill variety into it. One of the things that I think would help a lot is buffing the E, but potentially changing the quest. I feel like in the beginning, same problem with a lot of the utility abilities. Whenever they're connected to a quest, I'm not a huge fan of it because you're throwing out this ability left and right, not necessarily when it's best to use it, but just whenever you have it. I like this quest, though. When it is done, it is a really good quest, especially when you've got all the other E talents. It's a rather fun build, especially in like ARAMs. But in actual games, sometimes it's better to save your E for when you really need it. You can use your E to peel for an ally, or you can use your E to send an enemy a little bit closer to your team. And so in the beginning, you could ruin a lot of teamwork by just trying to quest. So I would almost rather have different quests, like an auto attack quest that is energy based, maybe a W quest that's like energy based. You can leave this in there, but maybe let's drop down the amount you need to hit. Or let's change it up to where in the beginning you use it for like wave clear or something. I don't know. But that's it for Morales. I just feel like a visual update would help, and also an adjustment to her playstyle. Then we get into kind of the second one, the hard to balance heroes. I think that there's two primarily, but there's three that I really want to talk about. So primarily there's Illidan. Like I said, same issue as Rise. Rise has received 5 or 6 reworks because they want to make sure that they get him perfect, and he's still in a pretty rough spot. Illidan, I just want them to untie everything from his trait, and instead, I want his trait to potentially be like an activatable. One of the things that the Demon Hunters get in World of Warcraft is they get kind of a... let's say the tanking Demon Hunters, the ones that generally like go metamorphoses. Well, I guess they go more into a demon form. But I like the idea of being like building up hatred and then doing something with that hatred. So I think that would be a cooler trait. Now, because we're not going to have the cooldown reduction, let's drop all of these cooldowns to compensate. But now that they're not tied to your actual trait, they're going to be easier to balance. If Illidans are sticking to people too much, you increase the cooldown of these. If Illidans are healing too much, then you lower the healing a little bit. Now, each piece will be separate, and you should be easier to balance. Another thing, too, is I feel like every iteration of Illidan that I see outside of the Heroes of the Storm iteration, he summons fire elementals. I don't know if he needs to summon fire elementals, but he summons fire elementals in World of Warcraft. He summons fire elementals in Hearthstone. And there's even points in Warcraft that he summons fire elementals. So that's something that could be potential. Maybe even that's one of the uses for his hatred. Maybe he has multiple uses for hatred, where unlike most resources, you have to use it for all of your abilities. What if Illidan has no resources for his main abilities, but then he has resources for his activatables? Kind of like how Thrall has those 8 stacks he needs to get before he can use his Ancestral. What if that's something that they do with Illidan? I don't know. But I feel like there's ways to rework him so not all this is tied to his trait and you give him a new trait. And then potentially just make adjustments to his playstyle. It's hard to compete with globals, but maybe they could buff Metamorphosis in team fights, so it's a harder choice where it's like, do you want to be better in team fights or do you want to have a global? I don't know, but I definitely think Illidan needs a rework because of that difficulty to balance. This is where we get into 2 support heroes, and all the support heroes kind of have this similar problem. They're very hard to balance for what they do. I think Abathur and Lost Vikings have very, very similar problems. You need to counter them, and if they're picked in the right situation and they're not banned and not countered, then they have a really high win rate. And they don't really have the most fun playstyle when you're playing against them. They're rather fun to play, but when you're playing against them, they're more just tedious and annoying to deal with. And so what could it make what could make these heroes have more counterplay and more fun? I actually did bring up a rework idea for the Lost Vikings that would make them less annoying to play against and more fun to play as, which is have them have auras. Each Viking has a different aura, and each aura buffs your allies around them in that way. So, for example, Balog would increase everyone's attack speed, Eric would increase everyone's health regen, and Olaf would give everyone maybe armor or maybe even spell damage. You could nerf a lot of their extra abilities for that playstyle, and then maybe when they all group up, these auras grow a little bit in size, so you don't need to keep them right there. But what would happen with this is that early game, it would make it to where you're more using them to buff your allies, and the playstyle of the map stays about the same. In a coordinated environment, you could still kind of play them like normal, but we'll just say that they're a little bit nerfed. If you're playing them like normal, you have 4 people in one lane. And so that was an idea that I sent out for Vikings 2 years ago. Abathur actually read an idea, and initially on Reddit it was downvoted, and I actually really liked it. And I think it eventually ended up getting in the positive and got pretty far. This guy, I can't remember who, and if you guys find the Reddit thread, then you can definitely bring it up. But he said the reason that he didn't like playing against Abathur was he felt like there was nothing he could do against an Abathur. Like, Abathur could just hide. Like, you can go try to find Abathur, he goes, but you generally waste more time trying to find and kill an Abathur than the value that their team would get and he would get during that time. And a good Abathur, you're probably not going to be able to find that easily. And Abathur's gone through a lot of rough patches recently, a lot of changes. And with all the experience changes, I feel like he's less fun to play now than he has ever been. And I'm someone who Abathur was my main for a long time. So what could they do to buff Abathur without making him overpowered? And so this guy came up with this idea, and he said, what if Abathur's abilities get stronger the closer he is to those abilities? So if you throw a hat on a target, but you're close to that target, your shield is increased in value. Your spikes are increased in value. So if you see a big shield on someone, you're like, this Abathur is close, let's go find him, right? There would be more counterplay because you wouldn't need to travel across the map to find him. He's got to be near the team fight somewhere. And so I thought that was a cool idea. Even with the traps, you throw a couple traps, you stay near those traps, and those traps are going to do more damage. Now you have wave clear, now you have camp clear, because you can drop mines down and then kill it. And this won't work for clone, it won't work for your other abilities, but just your hat, your mines. And I thought that was a really cool idea that added, you could buff Abathur while giving him a weakness, a very viable weakness. So I think Abathur, Lost Vikings, and Illidan should be reworked because they're hard to balance. Now let's get into the low pop heroes. The heroes that if you reworked them, you would probably hurt the least amount of feelings and also probably end up with a cool new hero that more people would be excited over. And so the first one we're going to be getting into is Nova. Nova is not the lowest popularity hero, but outside, if you remove quick match, she's played almost never in competitive play. I think a couple times recently in the DreamHack qualifier, maybe like once in any event outside of that. The playstyle that she has right now is kind of just tedious and annoying. You utilize clones to check vision, to dismount people. You utilize your ult to wave clear, and you just kind of poke people to add a teeny bit more damage in small engages. And that's about it. Nova is not a very exciting hero right now. She does not fit the feeling of a sniper. In fact, Ana feels more like a sniper than Nova does. Of course, Ana is a sniper, but to be the sniper assassin in a game and to not feel like a sniper at all, to feel more like an annoying pest that dismounts people and kind of adds a little bit of damage and uses her ult to wave clear, she's not that exciting. I feel like she just doesn't fit what she does in StarCraft. So My recommended rework for Nova would be to have her stealth be more of a secondary piece of what she is. Make her stronger for what she does, and make it to where she doesn't need to be as balanced off of that stealth. In StarCraft's co-op, she can switch weapons. She has a sniper rifle and she has a shotgun. And so I was thinking, what if she has that? Maybe we remove pinning shot and we give her the ability to switch weapons. The shotgun would allow her to have wave clear, potentially camp clear, and maybe you could go into a build that's more shotgun oriented. You would still have the ability to snipe, and maybe your snipe and clones do something different based on what weapon you have out. Maybe your clones do more damage when you have the shotgun out, but they automatically reveal that they're clones. And then maybe if you have a sniper out, they act more naturally. They stealth, they move around weird, they do other things. Maybe they have more health so you can tank tower shots when they're snipers, or vice versa. They do more damage when they're snipers, they have more health when they're shotguns, so you can use them to tank structures. You can use them to tank hooks, abilities like that. And maybe your Q is a really powerful snipe as a sniper, and it's a maybe it's like a smoke grenade or something. This is too gravesy. Maybe it's like a, I don't know. Maybe it's something different. Maybe you have to use a Q. Maybe in the shotgun form, you can Q on a target, and if you deal damage to them a certain amount of times, then your next snipe on them does like triple damage or something. So you kind of need a player like Arsenal Synergy a little bit, but that way you could kind of utilize the clones and stealth to get creative. So you go up, you hit them with the shotgun a couple times, and then maybe you stealth switch weapons and then snipe them and finish them off. There's a lot of things that I think can make her feel more like a sniper or more like what she's like in StarCraft. And by removing some of her kind of annoying features, you could make her viable, playable, fun to play without being overpowered. The next one would be Probius. Now, Probius is the least popular hero in the game by all senses of the game. He is the lowest played hero in competitive. He is the lowest played hero in Storm League. He is the lowest played hero in Quick Match. And I think the only one that he's not the lowest played hero in is ARAMs. This is Probius. Probius, I feel like, has a lot wrong with him. There's a major reason why he's the only hero I don't own in the game, and it's because I do not enjoy playing him at all. Probius, to me, doesn't fit what a probe would do, and also doesn't fit what I would want, like, a mage to do. His abilities are too slow for a mage, and his summons are just too weak to be a builder. I feel like they needed to pick which direction they wanted him to go in. If you want Probius to be a builder, you should commit to that. And I know they don't want more heroes like that, but sometimes that's what makes Heroes of Storm fun, is to have those weird, janky heroes that do things like Cho'Gall and Abathur and Vikings and stuff. And Deathwing even. Having a dedicated builder might be kind of cool. Have him have the ability to upgrade turrets. There's a hero in League of Legends that can, after a turret's destroyed, he can temporarily rebuild a turret. Maybe have Probius have that ability. I mean, I know we have like Rag for that, but having two different versions of that could be really cool. I don't know. I just feel like he's just really missing out on both sides. He's not fast enough to be a mage. I mean, if you stun someone long enough to get the W and Q damage off, most mages in the game will already have that kill. So Probius doesn't do that better. You could say that he's the best at zoning, but Chromie's way better at zoning than he is. In fact, there are a lot of mages that are better at zoning. Even like Junkrat and Chromie take that day. They take that role any day of the week from Probius. So Probius not only is the least popular hero because he feels clunky to play, he's the least popular hero because he is outclassed. And he's probably too difficult to balance. So he fits all the criteria except for maybe the redesign, because his design is actually pretty cool. Or his visual design doesn't need to be changed. So Probius is, I would say, the one that I think needs the rework the most. The other low pop hero that I was mentioning, or that I was thinking of, is Hammer, but Hammer's hard to balance, low pop. Um, I almost think that her tank should be like an ult. I know that sounds weird. Maybe have one of her ults be a stronger tank mode. But I just feel like she's just not that strong in tank mode anymore. Like, Vala can do similar damage to Sergeant Hammer, but she can move around. Where sure you get that extra range, but like at 20, Vala has that range anyways. And right now the game's so mobile. All bruisers are so mobile that sitting still is so risky. That I maybe it's just a meta, so that's why Sergeant Hammer is not high on my list. If I was to prioritize the heroes or their rework, I would say Probius, Nova, are at the highest level of the rework needed. I would say Illidan, Arthas, Morales, and then I would probably come back down to Abathur. And those are the heroes that I would think need to be reworked. Yes, guys, this is a 40-minute video. Why did I do this video? I don't know. It was just a conversation that I've been having with a couple people, and it was just something that I wanted to talk about. And I know it might have been kind of boring, but it's just a video that I've been wanting to bring out for some time of just reworks and why we have reworks. Why would I want more reworks? And ultimately, Heroes of Storm is going to be bringing out fewer and fewer heroes per year. And so if reworks are the answer to continue keeping the game fresh, I think that we should be looking at reworking low popularity heroes that didn't just fall out of the meta because the meta shifted, but heroes that fell out because they're too hard to balance. And I think if we rework those heroes, I think that we would be able to keep this game fresh with a least amount of effort in actually creating heroes. And so if we have to rework heroes, let's rework low pop heroes, in my opinion, first, then hard to balance, and then maybe old models. That way we don't really need to get art involved until like the last thing. Let me know what you guys think. I know that reworks are always a controversial topic, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me. Keep in mind, this is my own personal opinion. But I would be curious what you guys think about these reworks. Thank you guys so much for watching, and feel free to check out my future videos.